The governor of the Belgorod region, Vyacheslav Gladkov, suggested providing assistance to those residents of Belgrade who would like to evacuate to safer localities. The governor proposed evacuation within the Belgorod region, but he noted that if there are not enough places for those wanted to evacuate from Belgrade, governors from other Russian regions with whom he has already consulted, they will come to help. In this way, the head of the administration of Belgorod region is trying to make it seem like the evacuation of people from Belgorod and other localities in the region is a routine and natural event, and as if it should be happening now as the norm of the new Russian life. However, in reality, there is no norm in war, and the citizens of Russian Federation should have understood this. When the President Vladimir Putin on February 24, 2022 decided to attack Ukraine, when reports emerged that people were evacuating from populated areas in Ukraine, from Kharkiv, from Chernigov, from Kiev, from Sumy, and many other large and small cities and villages. It was about evacuating millions of people. It was challenging to find a safe place for them in Ukraine, which was being shelled and bombed and continues to be shelled by Russian armed forces. Millions of people had to leave their hometowns and villages and move to other countries. Millions became internally displaced. At the same time, there is no real prospect of ending the Russo-Ukrainian war. President Putin is still determined to continue this war until the destruction of the Ukrainian state he despises and the realization of his paranoid ideas about restoring the Soviet Empire within the borders of 1991 USSR. Thus, what we see now is only the first act of the tragedy associated with the attack on Ukraine. Ahead are many tragic pages of history, many refugees, many deaths, many explosions. We understand well the catastrophe that can result from further aggressive actions by the Russian leadership. The majority of citizens of the Russian Federation have always supported these aggressive actions, always lamented the loss of so-called great country, the USSR, and this nostalgia had been actively exploited by Russian political leadership and propaganda media. No one, however, told the Russians that the war resulting from the aggressive policy of their leadership and the intensive public support for this policy could come to the land of Russia itself, and people in Russian towns would be asking local authorities to evacuate them from unsafe cities. For now we are talking about the border with Ukraine, but imagine aggressive actions by the Russian Federation along the entire perimeter of its borders. How many more cities and villages will people be forced to leave because they cannot find a safe place in their homes? How many more people will become internally displaced? And how many will be forced to move to other countries to escape mobilization or bombardments? This is the real outcome of the policy towards neighboring countries conducted by the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. It has been said repeatedly that any war started by the aggressor, sooner or later, in one form or another, comes to the land of the state initiating aggressive actions. Russians who study the history of World War II know well that the attack of Nazi Germany on European countries and then on the Soviet Union ended in Berlin. People in Germany also suffered because of the liberation from Nazism. Peaceful residents of Germany who supported Adolf Hitler did not anticipate the real consequences of his aggressive policy. Now, the world increasingly compares President Vladimir Putin with Adolf Hitler because the very idea of revanchism, the idea of restoring an empire as presented in history textbooks to chauvinists who write these textbooks and to their compatriots who want to assert themselves at the expense of the suffering of others, the very paradigm of this thinking indeed allows us to draw absolutely clear parallels between the intentions of Adolf Hitler and the intentions of Vladimir Putin. Thus, the Russian Federation is finally turning into, in our eyes, a totalitarian and monstrous Reich. However, as usual, with such a transformation, problems arise not only for those people whom the leadership of such aggressive state wants to erase from the face of the earth. Problems also start for the citizens of the aggressive state. And we are not necessarily talking only about active participation in armed attacks on neighboring countries. The discussion may not only be about the death of so-called volunteers, in quotation marks, or servicemen who were sent to the fronts of the so-called special military operation, which has long turned into a full-fledged war. Actually, Vladimir Putin himself already acknowledges this and more frequently abandons the absurd term special military operation, using the word that accurately reflects the realities of the 20th century. This is a war, a cruel, ruthless, and seemingly endless war. It is evident that the residents of Belgorod become the first victims of this war simply because the city, with its military facilities, airfield, and armed forces within the Belgorod region, is directly located near the borders of the Russian Federation. It is precisely from the territory of the Belgorod region that they destroy the neighboring Kharkiv. The same Kharkiv that just recently Belgorod residents might have visited for shopping or leisure on weekends. Now, imagining that is almost impossible. Such a gap has probably forever opened up between two neighboring countries and peoples. A gap of mutual exhaustion and hatred that could become a true civilizational sentence for the Russian Federation. We understand that as this war develops and as the war does not end, it only evolves, taking on more and more dreadful dimensions. More and more Russians will suffer from this war. The discussion will no longer be just about drones. When new weapons appear, missiles, more and more people will want to evacuate from Russia. Fewer and fewer safe places will remain. And when Russia starts a war against another country, a new part of Russians will find themselves in despair and suffering, because war, as Ukrainians can tell Russians, always brings suffering and despair. Let the residents of Belgorod now explain this to the head of their administration. No, evacuation is not normal. Evacuation is the result of the crimes of the Russian political leadership, led by Vladimir Putin, and the foolishness of the Russian people themselves. Thank you for watching. Till next time.